be smarter for me to pace myself a little more.
I just had a bad night. I don't know why with the COVID.
The glitterati on the Democrat side asking for their money back. Are they getting conned out of supporting Joe Biden? Did they not know it was going to be this bad? George Clooney looking for his money back after a huge fundraiser, raising tens of millions of dollars. Joe Biden's friends and family now at odds with each other, trying to decide, can the man stick around as he tries to redeem himself in front of NATO and doesn't do a great job. We're facing an interesting question about how old is too old to be in power. And it also brings up that other major question: what happens when you live without faith and you don't know when to hang it all up? I want to explore that a little bit and the cycle of life here on Between the Lines. Let's do this. There's a sweet spot where we like to see our politicians somewhere in their late 30s, maybe until their 60s, where they've got life experience but energy, vigor, and they're able to transmit some of that experience, some of that time on this planet, and do good things for those around them. And then, like retirement from any other job, we kind of expect our politicians to step away. The early founding fathers did this. They didn't stay in these jobs for life. They actually had work to go do. They stepped into a role as a legislator, and then they had recesses. Most people may not realize this, but the recesses that exist for Congress was so they could go back and tend their farms or tend their businesses, the factories that they ran, the whiskey presses that needed to keep going, the stills. These people stepped away from being legislators because that wasn't a lifelong calling. That wasn't the way that they envisioned this sort of job. They moved back and they had this connection to the people and the land that they came from, that they represented. And at some point, they left the public life altogether and they went back to that and handed it off to the next generation. This life cycle is pretty natural because as you stop being in public life, you transition back kind of like a toddler. You end up having more and more needs. And we see our elderly parents are there and they bring us incredible joy and some sadness and some difficulties. And then if you're a Christian, you believe that when they give up this life, they move on to another one. We like to be in this world, but not of this world. We want to know that this is the world that we are living in, but we are not living for. And then we see the example of what's going on in public right now. And it's forcing a very difficult conversation for some of those who don't have a strong religious faith, who don't have a conviction that there's something else. We're seeing Democrats right now face down an aging president who is deteriorating rapidly. And he is doing so in a way that is visible to all.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin.
And it represents real threats to national security, but also to everything that they are selling on the political left, that babies are a real problem and we should have abortion for all, that we should just replace our workforce, not with new young workers who have American values and are raised in America, but we could just import them from a third world and see if they get along and they can plug into our system. Or if they don't, we'll just pay for them. The concern is that at some point, we are not going to have Americans who understand the value of America. And these politicians keep pushing it. I would say that one of the biggest things that I see are politicians that claim a religious faith because it gets them votes, but they don't seem to be living it. Now, I can't assess what's in the heart of a Nancy Pelosi or a Joe Biden, but I can see that they publicly support things like abortion, which are antithetical to the faith that they claim to be a part of. It seems like they're making a deal with the devil. They're trading off public power and a public persona that supports liberal causes, which are not liberal at all. They're just far left at this point. And the cost has to be that private life of faith and spirituality because they can't be living them both. And the second thing is you can only serve one of two masters. The Bible actually tells us this pretty clearly, that you have to choose one of two. You will either serve one and love that master and despise the other, or vice versa. You can't serve both with equal gusto. So what is Joe Biden serving right now? And why has he not hung up his spikes in the political game? Is it his family that's driving him, knowing that there's nothing for him when he leaves? Are they worried that they're going to lose track of power? My thought is that if you are not living for another life, for an eternal life, and this is all you've got, you're going to try to squeeze everything you can out of it. And that's why we're seeing a man who seems to be deteriorating at a rate we've never seen in the presidency. We've never seen anyone this old standing there. For all the modern technology, you cannot stop when we delaminate as human beings.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID.
And it's incredibly sad to watch. With compassion, we can see that. And as Americans who want our country to be successful, we can also be upset in the same way that Democrat donors right now are upset that they feel like they got conned. The reason I know that these people don't actually believe in the values that they're selling as politicians is because they don't live them themselves. They're not going out and getting abortion for all and living their best life with no children. Think about every politician. Almost all of them have children. And the ones that don't are the least genuine human beings you've ever seen. I introduce Exhibit A, Kamala Harris. Have you ever seen someone who speaks more uncomfortably to regular people than Kamala Harris?
For us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present.
And there is nothing weirder than an actual mother referring to Kamala Harris as
Mamala of the country,
like we've seen Drew Barrymore do. It's cringeworthy to a degree that every human being can see it and say, I don't want to do part of that. Whatever you do, just don't make that part of it. You think that woman is going to pick up the reins? Neither do I. Neither do the rest of the people in the Democrat Party. They're at a massive impasse because they trusted in something which is trusting in man and not in God. And here's the thing. There's one thing we know about time. Unbeatable. So far, no one has ever conquered Father Time, which is to say that God's plan continues to move forward whether we like it or not. It reminds me of the problem of suicide in the communities that I've come out of. Some of you know I worked in law enforcement. I worked on a squad where many of the agents around me were at retirement age. And that's an interesting time for them. Kind of a time that Joe Biden passed 20 years ago. A time when their public life starts drawing to a close. When the job that they did for 20 or 30 years is no longer needing them. Many people struggle with that. Same thing with those who served in the military with me. They leave that uniform, they leave that badge, they leave that sort of description where people look at you and they say, I know who you are. I can see from your outward appearance who and what you represent. And a lot of folks failed to build the other piece of it, that inside life, the husband, the father role, the American citizen, the neighbor, and the friend. If you didn't put enough time into those, suddenly you're looking at a very empty shell. And I have to imagine Joe Biden is looking at that too. That transition that people of faith are able to make, they are able to do it gracefully because they're not focused on what happens in this world. They're not defined by a job, by a badge, by a uniform, by a title at their private employment. They're defined by their relationships, their connection to God and their connection to their community. We should actually want that for some of these politicians. Why they don't want it for themselves is the thing we should be most worried of, because it tells me that they're a real possibility. They've given into two of the most deadly sins. One is pride. Nobody can do this job better than me, and so I dare not let it go. And the other one is greed, which is to say, I don't want anyone else to have this power. I don't want anyone else to have this money. I want to hold on and grab as much as I can, and I am unwilling to share the prestige and the financial gains that come from this position. They're mine, like Gollum holding on to the precious. If you remember, that's an important message about humankind. When you hold on to something that has more power than you, it eventually corrupts you to the point where you waste away. And there's no joy in that life. No one wants to be Gollum. It's the reason why it has to be thrown in the fire. Tolkien, it turns out, understood a little bit about this. And we should too. We should look at Joe Biden in several ways right now. We should look at him as a harbinger of what can come. You should look at him as a warning sign for those whose public and private life do not match up, because you can only choose one. And we should look at him as an example of what not to do, because what is sadder than taking the tail end of your life and decaying in front of the entire world, potentially at the cost of a world conflict and emboldening the real evil that is out there. Abroad and domestically, there are real evil people that do really evil things. And when you show weakness in public, when you are no longer able to do the job that you're asked, those people are emboldened. But through prayer, through reflection, and then hopefully through an election, maybe we move the needle back a little bit. And maybe we could find a little bit younger folks to come out there and carry the banner. I'm looking at you, millennials. I'm looking at you, Gen Xers. Those of you who didn't want to get involved, now is the time. Because those that are holding on with everything they've got, if they don't want to retire, we might have to coax them into it. But they need to know that there's someone willing to step into that gap. Is that what you're being called to do? It's time to pray on it. I'm Kyle Seraphin. This is Between the Lines. I hope it gives you something to think about. Go ahead and just hit that button. Follow the channel. Make sure you're subscribed. Catholic votes out there in the fight for America with the values of faith and family and freedom. Those are things that most Americans can agree on, and certainly all Christians can.